Welcome to Results Elevator. Today, we are going to discuss the topic of cross cultural communication, and the topic is very wide. Specifically, we want to investigate how to understand your boss or your manager if the person is coming from very different culture from your personal. We are working in international teams, and usually we are used to meet the colleague from another countries and we may notice that there are some differences, right? And there it may create some challenges. But if this person, this colleague, is your boss or your manager, those challenges might be very severe. So, what we are going to discuss today? We are going to touch the really briefly the topic of the culture itself, so what it is and why it matters. We are going to try to slice and dice the cultural thing and to understand the dimensions, how it can be analyzed, and provide some communicational tips for you how to work and build relationships with your manager.
Let's imagine that you are a new member in a new team and you are getting the task from your boss. And potential problems like unclear instructions or expectations, direct or indirect communication style, different understanding of the priorities for this task, or misunderstanding of the deadlines could be because of cultural difference, not because people are not really collaborative. So, what is the culture? As far as I know, there are around 200 of description what culture does mean. However, I like the term that describe a culture as a way of life. If we are talking about the culture, we can imagine it as a reverse pyramid. And culture are present on different levels. The first and big one is the global regions. After that, we are diving into nation level, organizational level. Of course, there are impact of professional on group level. And at the end, we can talk about individual level. Are the people from different cultures, different nations, or different regions the same within this group? Not, of course. However, the upper levels have impact on the bottom levels. Actually, understanding culture characteristics helps to establish productive working relationship, collaborative relationship. And here is we would like to mention such things like cultural intelligence. So what does it mean? The ability to understand, to respect, to communicate and interact with people from different cultures. Knowledge about other cultures, behavior, misunderstanding and conflicts. Actually, if you are growing your cultural intelligence, these things can be improved.
So, if the culture is a way of living, so how can we describe such a wide topic? And during this video, we are going to use 8 dimensions of culture descriptions that are communication, whether the culture is low context or high context, evaluation or the way of giving feedback, especially negative feedback, whether it's direct or indirect, the way of persuading, whether it's principles first or application first, leading, egalitarian versus hierarchical, deciding, consensual versus top down, trusting, task based versus relationship based, disagreeing, confrontational or the one that avoids confrontation, and scheduling or approach to time management, whether it's linear time or flexible time. So, we are going to cover all these dimensions and try to understand how to apply the understanding of these potential differences in the way how you work with your manager. And we are starting from the first one, that is communication. And it's very important to understand which differences we potentially might have, as communication covers all the aspects of our life. You start working with communication, and all your job, all your interactions, they will be through communication. So that's why we are going to cover the topic and describe what kinds of communications are. So, in the context of culture, there can be low context cultures or high context cultures. The low context culture, they assume that the good communication is direct, clear, and simple. People actually mean what they say. And such kind of cultures are the US, the UK, Germany, Nordic cultures. So these people would expect that you structure your communication, that you provide transparent information, that you cover all the important topics, that you don't talk about some things that are not important to the agenda of your meeting or your interaction. There also can be very specific approaches to small talks because usually we are learned that small talk is very good to start conversation, but in some cultures, specifically in the US, that might be considered as the waste of time. So you need to be cautious with the low context cultures. In high context culture, in contrary, the good communication is nuanced and layered. So people don't say all that they think. It's important to understand the context. It's important to understand people involved, the gestures, the mimics, the tone of voice. And usually we refer to such countries as South countries and Latin America or Asian countries, and here people would expect actually that you understand all the variety of these nuances, of all this context, that you are not very specific because that may be considered as rude, and that you follow actually all this flow of understanding the context of the communication. So let's imagine that you have real world examples, right? So you start working with your new boss and you're getting your new tasks assigned. So, how different managers from different cultures potentially would approach uh, setting up the tasks. So the person from the low culture will say exactly what he wants from you. So he will give you specific instructions with clear results, with clear deadlines. You potentially will get exact steps how to do it, and maybe even over communication how to do that. What is important is that in this case, if you don't understand what should be done, you're expected to ask questions. And if you're not asking questions, the person assumes that you get what you should do. And here we may have the conflict because sometimes persons from high context culture are not really comfortable asking those questions, and this is potential first conflict. So if you have a manager from the high context culture, you won't get specific instructions. Probably you will have a task and you would need to figure out how to do it, and what is the expected result. You also need to understand like what is expected based on your previous interactions with your boss. And in this case, if you're asking clarifying questions, it will be perceived as something very unpolite or unprofessional. And here is a very big challenge. So, what happens if you don't understand what you should do and your boss is from high context culture? And it's very tricky situation because you need to get information from someone who expects you to understand what should be done. And what are the potential problems is that you might be perceived as non-professional, or that you don't trust your manager, or even worse, that you think your manager is bad, that is he or she is not able to provide you a clear task settings. So you need to avoid this situation, and in this case, you would need to do your homework. So before getting back to your boss, you would need to dig and dive into the context You would need to try to understand how this task was done before, if that's possible. You need to talk with your colleagues, asking them for help. And when finally you're coming back to your boss, you would need to show that you already prepared. So you would need to describe all this context, that you are aware about that. You need to propose some ideas and just check to validate if you understood that right. So let's go to the next example. When you have your task done, how to report it back. So managers from low context culture would expect the same as they provided to you. So they expect very clear, specific bullet points, what was done, how it was done, specifically finished on the day when there was a deadline. In high context cultures, it's not the case. So the report might be also quite wide and unspecific. It there would be there could be some charts, pictures, however, not so many numbers and much more descriptions. And probably you would need to make an oral presentation, and for sure you would need to underline the efforts done by your team, not only you, but also other people involved, because in high context cultures, the interaction between people and relationships are very important. And in each interaction that you are having, you would feel this, and it would be very beneficial for communication if you highlight actually that uh, you are putting some efforts in setting up relationship during execution of some task. The next topic is evaluation and feedback. So that's very also wide challenge for people in communication, especially if you're getting your evaluation from your boss, or you have to provide a feedback. Let's say you have some one-to-one and your boss is asking like, how are you doing? Do you like your job? Do you have any challenges, right? So the way how we provide negative feedback especially differs much. Um, in USA, there is very like a lot of theories are coming from the US, and the managerial literature is coming from the US, and they are learning us how to actually provide the feedback, right? We have sandwich, for example, approach or something else. Mm, in the US, you would expect that the feedback would be quite direct and specific, timely, and respectful, not emotional. On the same time, in low context culture, that can be a little bit hidden. For example, you will get something positive and then you will get something negative. Um, for example, in the US, you can get the feedback like great job team, but, and the feedback actually goes after that, but. However, cultures, high level cultures, they won't get it. So they will read only the first sentence and they usually don't understand the topic itself. Let's say, for example, Ukraine, that is high context culture. On the same time, this culture is very direct in negative feedback. So usually the negative feedback is provided without any coverage, and that's only it. It's assumed that it should be mentioned only some problems, everything else is good. That when such people are communicating with other cultures, they may seem very unpolite. And here we have this collision of how you used to provide feedback and how you used to receive this feedback. Potentially, if your manager is aware of your cultural differences, he or she would align the provision of the feedback with those differences, but it might not be the case. So when you communicate with your boss, just step back and understand like what he's actually trying to say based on this feedback. And what is also very interesting and sometimes confusing is when the cultures are covering what they actually want to say. That is called upgraders and downgraders in communication, and it's not obviously connected with high context or low context or the way of provision of the feedback. So that's when the culture covers actually the meaning of what is being said. And the major representative of such culture is the UK. And I like very much the example when the Brits say, I would suggest, usually it's mm, being treated as some proposal that might be accepted or refused, but what is actually meant is that it's an order. And if you have a boss from the UK who would say, I would suggest, you probably should treat this as a direct order to do this, because otherwise this person will be also very confused why you're not doing what is being asked, right? But it's when you don't know this specific, it's very hard to understand, like whether it's actually what the person thinks or not.
So leading is another skill how we can take a look at the culture. And here we are two, on the scale of leading, here are two different opposites: egalitarian cultures and hierarchical cultures. If we're talking about egalitarian, it's open disagreement is allowed. This is the one of the characteristics. Actions can be taken without some specific managerial approvals, less attention to hierarchical levels, allowed to interact with people from different levels. That's kind of less of rules, let's say like that. And if you're talking about hierarchical cultures, it's strong, defined rules how to communicate between levels, how to communicate with your bosses, with your subordinates, how to get the approvals. Like people usually not allowed to do something important without approval of the boss. Yes, communication follow also the hierarchical structures, and you should always keep the communication within your level and try to avoid communication with other levels without, again, without approval, without additional empowering. And take a look at this example. Think about the example. If you get requests to upgrade to adjust some report format for the client, possible responses depends on the managers from different regions can be also different. If we are talking about Asia, you immediately start doing, you will be able to clarify the details after. If we are talking about some management from Netherlands, yeah, do not hesitate to clarify to get the results as manager would like to get at that. Deciding. It's also very interesting scale because it's described how management make the decisions. And there are again two opposites: consensual decision making and top-down decision making. If we are talking about consensual, it means that people, managers are looking from support from colleagues, subordinates. Also, this is kind of collective approach. In such system, all team members have the opportunity to express their opinions, to influence the decision, to make some contributions. From opposite side, top-down decision-making approach, it's such system decisions are made by the manager or upper management and just simply passed down to subordinates from execution. Of course, we should remember that there are no exactly black or white things. We can have some cultures like United States, UK, that are somewhere in the middle of these opposites. However, if we are talking Japan, despite that strong hierarchical approach in leading, consensual decision making is quite accepted by this culture. And if we are talking about India, it's a clear example of top-down decision making. And how to behave in this situation. Yes, so consensual decision making approach assumes that it should be engaged the team to gather the opinion, to evaluate the ideas. It would be great to show patience because decision making may take more time due to need for agreement, due to need for evaluating all the options. And you as a subordinate, be prepared for discussions because you will probably need to explain a lot of the details. If we're talking about top-down decision making, the first thing that we advise to do just accept the decision, and after that, probably you will be able to clarify something to influence somehow this decision. And what is important here, proactive, regular reporting. So send progress, results report, keep transparency, predictability, and clearly share the progress, the risks, changes in the deadlines, if any, and so on. Trusting. Trusting built within different cultures, within different regions, also a bit different. And there are again two main approaches like task-based trust and relationship-based trust, and it's it's totally different. For example, in USA, task-based trust approach or that way is quite common. So if you would like to get the trust, show that you are professional, to show your achievements, competence, ability to accomplish the task, and that you are able to follow your commitments. It is important to show the high level of professionalism, meet commitments and deadlines. Relationship-based trust, it's first of all about relationship. Yeah, it's first of all about personal connections, friendly relationships, and social interactions. It is important to invest time in building personal relationship, show empathy, be open in communications. And employees in such cultures very often to have, I don't know, dinners, informal meetings. It's quite important to know personal aspects, family aspects, asking about children, asking about the situation, how it's going, and build relationship based on such open communication. So, trusting, task-based trust, emphasize the responsibility from your words. As I promised, I have sent. As I've done the commitments, I do my commitments. Show how actions impact the business. It's also important in communication with the boss, like this way we can reduce the risk of additional expenses. So that shows that you engaged into the problems, that you are professional. Choose optimal communication channels because, for example, for task-based trust cultures, it's good channels and structured mails work, or having less call during the weeks. Uh, if we are talking relationship-based trust cultures, we need to bring some context. We need to bring some small talks prior the communication. For me, it was interesting on practice when I've got some mails from people from Asia, and mails were started from the some small talk, like, I hope this letter finds you well, I wish you the good day, and all such phrases. Do not hesitate to schedule calls, find the solutions, discuss the issue, ask for things, how they are going, and yes, take the interest of personal life very carefully, not aggressively, not pushing for that, but it's important to remember about holidays. It's important to consider religions in communications with these managers, with this culture. Disagreeing, it's interesting because I would say, from my personal background and practical cases, disagree, and it's quite risky uh, part of communication, whether you communicate with confrontational cultures or the cultures that avoids confrontation. So be smart in communication, be smart in the approach. However, again, there are two different options, like confrontational cultures. It is common to openly and directly express disagreement or criticism. It is important to discuss all the aspects of issue, and between people, even there will be a conflict. It's okay, but again, think that you are talking with your boss. For the culture, yeah, and the example, for example, Germany. For cultures that avoid confrontations, it's important to maintain good relationship, harmony. Disagreement is expressed more uh, careful, I would say. Anyway, be prepared to show your disagreement. Remember that everything is relative, and we are talking about many dimensions at once. Consider the way of leading, consider how to get the feedback, all the rest dimensions, yeah, and consider low and high context communication um, dimension. So be prepared, always show your respect, select the right time and place. Actually, we would suggest to start some communication with some positive aspects, propose solution, and be calm. Uh, that's very important to avoid emotional reactions, maintaining calm tones. So be professional. And here are just a few examples. Uh, if we let's take a look at Germany and confrontational cultures. I think this plan may cause the delays in some cases. My proposals include the following steps to optimize the process. So you are showing you're disagreeing on some ideas, on some tasks. However, you are proposing the solutions. There are mixed cultures, and we can talk here about USA, for example, UK, and this is the characteristics are combination of directness with diplomacy. And I understand your point of view. It's good plan. Perhaps we could also consider other options. Yeah, I would suggest from our previous slide. And cultures that avoiding confrontations express disagreement. Uh, Usually, we would advise using some indirect formulation. Start with positive comments, propose alternatives. Combine directness with diplomacy, express your opinion clearly, but respect other views. Emphasize constructive criticism and propose the solution as well.
So, and now we go to scheduling. It's the topic that usually confuses a lot of people in international organization, international companies, because the way how we perceive time differs across cultures, and the way how we commit to certain deadlines is also different. And here where it comes confusion, because you might be expecting that at some specific day there will happen something and it's not happening. Or it may be otherwise, that you are providing some very tentative deadline and you see that other teams are struggling to get it done even though it's not mandatory. So what is our difference? A linear time culture, they think that actually everything is done uh, step by step. So they are very specific in planning. They expect everything would be done according to the plan. They value that you're punctual and that you do when you say it will be done. So, of course, when you're working with such a manager, you would need to be very careful with your deadlines and with your commitments. You would need to show up on time on all of the meetings. Some cultures even expect that you will show before, so that you would need to connect to the meeting or come to the office before actually the time when you start the meeting, just because you need to be also prepared. On the other part of the scale, we have flexible time cultures, and those cultures, they don't see the time as a linear sequences of actions. That's why they have much more flexible approach to timing. So um, they don't they don't expect you to do everything on time. And let's say if you schedule some meeting for 30 minutes, it can take 5 minutes, or it can take 1 hour, or even 2 hours, and it's okay because something has been changed. Maybe you come up to this very interesting topic that they think should be discussed, and that's why the timing for the meeting is extended. The same happens with the deadlines. So it's not because they don't value the deadline, but they give more attention to the context, to relationship, to potential changes in the environment, and they accommodate that to timing. It's also in some cultures that comes from historical point of view and from the political situation. So in the cultures, in the countries with a lot of instability, where it was difficult to plan in advance something for a quite long period of time, such countries, they adjust on the go. The same happens during the work. And if you have a manager from the flexible time culture, so you may expect that the same will be happening. And if you are getting some deadline, maybe you don't need to kill yourself to get it done until this deadline. So let's go next to persuading. And persuading is the same as communication, right? We are presenting our ideas, we are presenting our projects, we are reporting our work done, and we want something to happen because we depend on other people. We need to get them on board with our ideas. And how we do this and how people receive this information, that will be dependent on the culture. And this difference is seen from the school, how our kids are taught to make presentations and how this presentation specifically also is made. So when you are talking to principals, first cultures, and those cultures are a lot of European cultures like France, Germany, Italy, Spain. So this culture always start from theory from theory, from methodology, from data. So they provide a lot of credibility before going to conclusions and actual ideas. And when you're working, let's say, with a German manager, he will expect that you are first start building your credibility of your investigation, of your projects or your idea. So, where you get data, how you analyze them, which theories are you covering, or why you are doing this. So, all these theoretical things. And at the end, you will have a summary. So, your ideas. On the opposite side, application first cultures such as US, Canada, United Kingdom, they expect that you start from your ideas and summary. And you're providing first the result of everything that you have done, your main idea, and then, if necessary, you go to the details. Um, what happens if you don't align in your communication and your persuading to the things? It happened that the application first cultures, they will expect the summary, executive summary. So what? Answering to this question. If they don't get it at the beginning, they become bored. Usually they don't listen to the end. They may become nervous. They will ask questions. So why you covering so many details? So where is actually the summary? Why we do need to listen this? Right? So if you're working with the UK, with the US, usually in your presentation, you will have the first slide that will be called executive summary. And it will cover everything, and then you go to the details. At the same time, if you're working with principles first, boss, if you start from the summary, he might be confused. So you will feel the lack of trust in your ideas and in your conclusions if you start directly from the summary. So you would need to put the summary at the end. So putting the summary at the end, um, because we are from such kind of culture, and what we want to say is that 8 dimensions of the culture, there are a lot of them. So it's very hard to keep in mind all the time all these dimensions, specifically because it's not absolute. It depends on where you are coming from and how you relate to this culture. You need a lot of knowledge and intelligence to adjust yourself and also a lot of practice. But knowing those differences will help you and will make your life easier. First of all, it's necessary to say that there is no right and wrong cultures. They are all different, all unique. They have their own characteristics that are not good or bad, they're just different. Um, Cultural characteristics are relative. So, for one culture, I don't know, working with the US might be very big difference, but for others, not because we can stay in the different parts of this scale. National culture is not the only thing that distinguish the individual. So it's not only the country where the person was born, it's also the country where he lives, it's also the organization where he works, it's also the team, and a lot depend on individual. We cannot say that all people from one country um, follow the same characteristics. Why we need to know about culture is because your level of professionalism, so how the boss is seeing you, might depend on your cultural intelligence. And to be more effective, to be more successful, you probably would need to understand those differences. So, and that's worth doing that. You will be much more easy person to work with if you follow uh, the cultural context and if you adjust your communication to the people you're talking with. So that's all what we wanted to cover today. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you in the next video.
Thank you very much. Talk to you next time.